First of all, let me welcome you to my hometown. This is such a wonderful place to be. I know Nancy Naigle is a local, and we've adopted Kelsey, so that's all taken care of. I have looked over your websites, and I'm amazed at the wealth of knowledge that you all have when you bring to this table. So the first thing I want to know is how many of you write small town romances? Okay, well, there's one big city girl, but we'll let her in anyway. Okay. And I find that small towns let you get the little quirky characters and whatever in that kind of move the story along and make it a lot of fun. So when I'm saying this, let me ask you, what do you find is the perfect romance? What do you think of? And we all know it's going to be happily ever after. But what do you find that would be the perfect romance? What do you consider the correct mixture? Do you need opposites attract? Do you need enemies to lovers type tropes? What is your best? And I guess we'll go around. We'll start with some people that I know. Well, so we'll start with Kelsey.
Of course we will, because I'm not really sure what the question was. So somebody asked, is this about romances or romantic?
A romance, yeah.
On the chat. Nan, are you going to watch the chat, or do you want us to watch the chat?
I'm going to do my best to see it as it comes up. I'm not sure what's going to work on this end, to be honest with you.
Well, someone asked, is this about romances or romantic mysteries? And I would say, yes.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah, because romance is a mystery. We don't know how it's going to go. Work.
Oh Lord.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And some of us do write suspenses, romantic suspense as well. So you're going to get a little bit of everything with us today.
Exactly.
So as far as the perfect romance is concerned, as Nancy Naigle knows, I never do anything by the rule. So I don't think there is a perfect romance. Obviously, like you said, Nan, we have to have the happy ever after or the happy for now. But I think the perfect romance depends on the reader, because we all know that the reader has different likes and dislikes and expectations. So, I can go at it from a reader point of view. And that is, I love character-driven romances, because if it's just plot, I'm not all that interested in the two people getting together. And I, unlike some people, like to both read and write the sexy times. I get a little frustrated when they close the door. But as far as tropes are concerned, I am a diehard second chance fan. So.
Okay, let's move on. And I know I'm going to pronounce your name wrong. Please forgive me. Is it Caridad Piñeiro? Oh,
Piñeiro, yes, thank you.
My pleasure. I've been practicing all week. I wasn't sure I was going to get it right.
You got it right.
So what is your feeling? And I know I like to put a little zing of adventure in mine. I will put it as adventure. So when you write your big city romances there, darling, what do you consider your perfect romance?
Yeah, well, I do just write big city. I do have some things set here on the Jersey Shore, but not really small town, even though they are small towns, because I think we got a little bit different of feel all along the East Coast over here, especially in the northern part of it. So I think Kelsey was right, is that, what's the best romance is really different for every reader, because they have their own favorite things. For me personally, I love second chance romances. I love enemies to lovers and friends to lovers. I really like that, making that connection with them. And for me, really, what's a good romance is when it takes a little bit of time for them to develop that relationship. I don't necessarily like it when they jump right in. And as much as I do write some sexy romances, I like having the characters really form a mental connection and that romantic connection before it really goes to the next level. And so that's what I really love to see. It's a story that has a lot of meat and a lot of characterization where you actually believe that they've fallen in love. And so when that happens, you can believe everything else that happens in the story.
Right. Jenna, how about you? What do you feel like is your perfect romance?
Well, I am a diehard second chance at love person. My all-time favorite is Jane Austen's Persuasion. I could read Wentworth's letter over and over again and swoon every time. But I like Enemies to Lovers. I like Friends. I like everything except for Secret Child and Secret Babies. I'm not a huge fan of that. And Secret Child in particular, because I just feel so bad for the man who's missed all this time with his child. But I know it's popular. I know a lot of people like it. But if someone were saying what would be perfect about a romance, in my mind, it's not just that they get to happily ever after or happily ever for now, but they deal with those things that keep getting in their own way. So in some ways they fall in love with themselves so that now they're able to have a relationship that's, not just built on lust or misunderstanding or whatever. I like to get to the end of the book and see that they've grown some in themselves as well.
You like that journey?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that leaves my other favorite, Nancy, right over here. Give us your favorite one.
Well,
romance.
I don't know how you randomly picked 5 girls, 6 of us, and we all have the same second chance, favorite. And maybe that's because I have some exes. I don't know, but it happens. But it's funny because I'm sitting here kind of laughing because as you were talking, Jenna, and you were talking about the secret baby, and I was like, yeah, I hate that too. And then I realized that in my new book, I've got a secret baby. One that the girl shows up, and the kid's like 4 or 5, and you're like, but it just happened. I didn't plan it. I actually didn't even think about it until just now. So I think that's pretty funny. But I think any trope that's done well, as long as the writing's good, any of those tropes can work for me. But I will say this, as far as my perfect romance, other than the trope side, I love a story that the town, whether it's big city or small town, either one, I just want to really be sucked into, the surrounding area, the community, and those secondary characters. Those are the little extra things that pull me into a story and make me just hang on to it forever. So I think it's those extra elements. It's the little things.
And little things do mean a lot. I think you're right in saying that it has to be an immersion into that world. You have to be drawn in, and that's with any story. I want to feel the heat from the Jersey Shore. I might want to get lost in what they're baking. The smells. It's that all-encompassing feeling of your senses that draw you into a book.
Yeah.
So
there was one of Kelsey's early books, and I remember, that secondary character that had the freaky, funky earrings. And I will never forget her. I loved her. And it can be because the littlest thing that will stick in the reader's minds,
Yes, but you've made that connection to your reader, and that's always so important.
Yeah.
When you do pick up your ideas, where do you get them from? Do you have and I have problems some days even cutting on the radio where I will get an idea. But do you find yourself just randomly attacked by your characters, whether it's at night in your dreams or just listening to the radio or watching the news?
Are we going to go from Nan back up?
We're sitting around the board, y'all. Y'all just jump right on in.
I can never really remember the origin of a story, of a book idea, because they do sort of percolate for a while. You get this kind of nugget or kernel, and it goes. But I do know origins of certain aspects of my books. For example, my family and I discovered this show called Airplane Repo. And I remember thinking, I have to have one of those guys in a book. And that actually is in a cozy mystery. So it's not really a romance, but it's an idea of, sometimes I'll see things and think, I've got to put that that's got to be in a book. So I remember those things, but in terms of the origin, by the time I'm writing, there she is. There's been a process to get there. And sometimes I can't remember what the initial thing is, but they do yammer in my head. Like you said, you'll be driving along. I do my best writing when I'm driving or I'm running.
Oh, bless your heart for running.
Well, I haven't in a while, but when the mind's just going, they just start going. And I'm waiting for the hat or the device that you just put on and it downloads your brain into your computer, because
they tell me that goes
that'd be a horror film.
Yeah.
People do not need to, like, some of the stuff up here is not fit for public consumption. Just
you can
saying.
put a filter on.
Okay, good. I need a filter for a whole lot of 4-letter words.
Bless your heart, honey. Bless your heart. Okay. I'm glad finally to see everybody. So thank you so much for getting me back on here. How do you develop your characters? Is there a certain thing that y'all like to do when developing your characters? Do you make a running list of well, we all know the hair color, the height, whatever, the broad shoulders. Is there something that you do that helps you keep it straight, I guess, when you think of writing a Bible for your stories?
Well, I'll jump in first on this one.
Okay.
I think I kind of started doing this when Kelsey and I were crafting our granny books together years ago, but I like to, and almost have to, have one of those big sticky note pads on the easel. And I cut out pictures of the dog and the characters and maybe some other elements that are going to be in the book. And I keep them on that piece of paper stuck on the easel in front of me all the time, just to kind of help me keep grounded. And a lot of times too, I'll kind of put family tree stuff, because sometimes I don't know why I make it really complicated, but I always end up like with second cousins or great grandmothers. And I mean, I could just make it up how I want to. So I don't know why I make it so hard, but so I'll put those elements on the wall too. So yeah, because if I don't, I can, turn a blonde into a brunette in a heartbeat, which, is no big deal these days. We do it all the time, but it can be confusing.
All right, who else wants to talk about this?
For me, Nan, it's usually my character's occupation that comes to me first, or just some striking part of and I don't mean physical, because that actually is. Early on when you start writing, that seems super important, and later, unless there's something really different about them, sometimes I don't, I may only mention their hair one time. But for me, the occupation really creates a lot of the structure sometimes of the book, and it also creates metaphor. So for example, in one of my romantic suspenses, the heroine is a blacksmith. And so when she thinks of the hero's eyes, she doesn't just, swoon about his blue eyes or whatever. She compares it or thinks of it as how hot her welder, how hot her fire is, or, something like that. So for me, it gives me that, it gives me that piece to kind of, because it's so much of what we talk about or think about is our career, whether it's right or not. So a lot of times it's that or something that's really, really strong in the personality.
Okay. Caridad.
I guess I usually, it's really funny. I have a tendency to start with the female characters really screaming in my head first. And what I try to think of is like, who are they really? And what is it that keeps them from engaging in a journey that leads to their happily ever after? Have they had a family dysfunction? Is there something about their life that they've become so involved with one thing, for example, a career, that they forget about everything else that really is what makes life complete? And then once I decide on that, I say to myself, who's the worst possible hero I could give her to love? And because I really want to torture her and make her teach and learn something along this journey until she finally, decides to get together with that hero. And the hero likewise, there's got to be something about her that is something he doesn't want to become attracted to.
Right.
So it becomes this give and take and this pull in the story until they finally kind of, resolve their journeys and manage to find a way to come together to have that happily ever after. And I love that give and take that happens as they both learn to overcome these things that have kept them from really, living the fullest life that they can live.
Right.
And so that's what I really, how I really start beginning to craft the stories.
Jenna, what about you?
I usually
I'm
have
sorry.
to take notes afterwards. I'll have an essence of kind of who their personality, if she's feisty and outspoken and he's darker, broody, whatever it is, I have that. But a lot of who they become evolves while I'm writing. And so sometimes I'm having to take notes afterwards to remember, things I said about that. And that's mostly like backstory and stuff like that. Like, okay, this is how they're behaving. How would they come to that type? So a lot of that for me evolves later as I'm writing.
Does anybody else write backstory? I tend to jot down at least maybe a page of backstory just when it hits me what they're doing or where they came from.
Yeah, I definitely give them histories, and besides the physical things, histories about where they went to school, where they grew up, do they have brothers and sisters, are they the middle child, all that kind of stuff, so then I can flesh it out later as I'm writing.
Yeah. Well, while we're talking, and I know this is a very important question, so give yourself a moment to think. Are you a plot or a pantser? Plotter or pantser? And we will start with Kelsey.
Yes. My answer was really simple.
She took my answer.
It really depends on the story. And I think when, and I may be answering another question here. I think I froze. Can y'all hear me?
Oh, I can hear you, sweetie.
Okay, I'll just keep going then.
There you are. You're beautiful as ever. Go ahead.
So it used to be that I thought there was one way to write a book, or at least you were going to find your process and every book was going to somehow, abide by that. And they don't. I think everybody sort of has things that they do every time, but let's be honest, sometimes the book fights back and it's when you wanted to plot and the characters are, getting in the way of that somehow. So I think to do straight up plotting doesn't work for me because I'm such a character driven writer, but I do create somewhat of an outline now. But it's also because I understand plot structure a lot better, and I could talk about that forever, but I won't. So
I find here lately, I'm learning more of the outline as you say. I used to just write as they were talking to me. And would often box myself in. I would say, okay, you guys are gonna have to fight this thing out and figure, tell me which way you want to go. So, but I'm getting there.
I don't think there's anything righteous. There's nothing righteous about either way, right?
No.
My first couple books that I ever wrote, Sweet Tea and Secrets and Out of Focus were pantser books. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I don't even know if I put the quotation marks in the right place. I never put the commas in the right place. That's just a given.
Neither do I.
But, once you get under contract, things start rolling fast and furious, and to be able to plan and to still have time to live your life, because you have to live your life to get the ideas. Plotting helps keep you on a timeline. It helps you kind of know where you are in your story. There's so many elements that tie into having, a strong outline or plot for your story.
Right.
So I do a whole lot more of it now. But things grow and change organically. You get new ideas. I generally get those new ideas when I'm on like the last 2 chapters, and then I have to really fight with myself to do the work because I was really tired and ready to end the book. And then I have to go back and fix or add or change something. But it definitely grows and changes.
Jenna?
I'm a pantser by nature, but then I've worked as a freelance ghostwriter in fiction, and you're required to be able to plot. And I discovered how fast I can write from a plot and never be stuck. And that was really exciting. And I know people who plot, who are diehard pantsters, talk about plotting as they'll feel constrained or it's not fun to write. But I actually have found writing much more joyful when I can sit down and I know exactly what I'm doing and I can crank out a ton of words in a short period of time. And so I try to plot now, but plotting is agonizing for me. It takes me a while, for the same reason it takes me a while to know my characters, is so much happens during the writing. And so trying to do that in advance is kind of hard. I try to get the major plot points for sure. And then I try to get sort of the chapters lined up. And so that's what I try and do now, even though it's against my nature.
Caridad, how about you?
I definitely started off as a pantser because I was a science major. So writing to me was something that came, it was inbred. It was nothing, I never really took a lot of English classes and things like that. So I was a pantser to begin with. But then as I started writing more and more, and like Nancy said, then when you start writing for traditional publishers where you have contracts, you have to deliver, you have to have a much more focused framework. And especially, whether I'm doing contemporary romances or a romantic suspense, I have a tendency to do them in groups of 3. Where the stories intertwine often, or at least the characters intertwine. And so I really did have to sit down and become more of a plotter so that those stories would make sense and they would weave together in the right way. And especially with romantic suspense, a little bit more because you've got to put red herrings in there so that, the reader is always wondering what happens, and it's kind of 2 steps forward or 3 steps forward, and then, oh, wait, that's not right, and they go back. And so it does require a little bit more emphasis on a plot when you're writing something like romantic suspense. For me, at least for me.
I wrote a romantic mystery once, and I was maybe halfway through it when I realized I only had one suspect. So this is why plotting a mystery is important. I had to go back and add people to be suspects.
I do think, Nancy, I don't know if you would say this, sorry, Nan, but I think we both started plotting a little more once we did start writing mystery, because mystery is much harder to not plot.
Yeah, definitely. And because we were collaborating, there were 2 of us working, and that way we could kind of split it up, and we knew scene 1, scene 2, and we could just split it up and roll with it. But yeah, it definitely is a productivity factor.
Do you enjoy, when you're writing your romantic suspenses or your mysteries, do you enjoy your villains?
Times.
I find that sometimes my villains are so ingenious. I'm in awe of them when I'm writing them. So I was, just a curiosity spot. Do they take over? Do you find one character taking over more in your stories than another character?
When I wrote my Adams Grove series, I was a member of the Thriller Writers Association. And so my first book was a International Thriller Writers debut novel. And so I'd say I write light thrillers because there really was no thrilling in it. Because my stuff is so sweet. But anyway, by the time, but it was a great group, and I was really inspired by all those thriller writers. And so by the time I got to Mint Juleps and Justice, I was really making an attempt to write a thriller. And so I'm even in the serial killer's mind, in his point of view for some chapters, and it totally freaked me out. And so between Mint Juleps and Justice and Barbecue and Bad News, which kind of both have this bad guy in it, I've never written another one. So I'm not sure I could say that I love my villains in that context.
Okay. Yeah. What about your romantic thrillers, Caridad?
My romantic suspense, they're a combination of ones. But I do like, getting in the head of whoever is doing whatever kind of crime. Like I'm writing for Harlequin Intrigue again, where the suspense is really more of the plot, the character. The romance really takes a secondary story, although obviously for me, since I love writing romance, I always sneak it in there, more than I think some of the other intrigue authors do. But I think it's important to kind of get in their head and figure out why is it that that they're doing what they're doing, because you want them to be believable as well, and they have to have a story arc also, even though eventually we all want them to be caught and sent away and pay for the crimes they commit. But I've had some where Nancy, they got a little bit more gruesome than I ever would have thought. And then it worries you that you can actually think such evil things in your brain, but it's fun. I think it's part of the fun of writing. Suspense is that it does, just give you a different perspective on people and the things that they can do.
Jenna, how about you? I don't know if you do any adventure or adventurous characters or even villains. Do you have maybe?
I have a romantic mystery series. It's basically a sleuthing couple that I always describe as they stumble over dead bodies by day and into bed at night. And then I have cozies and I have a romantic suspense. And one of the things, I'm thinking about my villains now, and they were all kind of interesting. But I think the thing that, when a lot of times when you think of villains, you're thinking of Dirk Dastardly or, they're just bad to the bone. But most of the time, villains in almost anything, they don't necessarily see themselves as being villains. I mean, they're setting out to do what they feel is right. And sometimes that means having to kill somebody, but, and then maybe they know that's wrong, but, so it's much more than good versus evil. They do have their, which makes it sometimes harder for your sleuth to figure out what's going on, because sometimes they might appear completely normal, and realize there's this sort of underlying thing about them. As far as characters that are popular or kind of take over, my villains don't really, but I do have some secondary characters that are, and they're octogenarians actually. You
got to give us old folks a good hand there. So go on, do that.
And they're probably some of the favorite characters that my readers have, because they're just, they say whatever, do whatever, and they're just hilarious. And they can be antagonists sometimes too.
I was going to say the villain I have in my Blue Bonnet series is quite dastardly. He is just a mess and a half, and trying to keep him reined in control is taking all my willpower right at this moment. We have an interesting question, and it says, what are the worst things that you've ever done to your characters in your stories? And what would you say as taboo for your characters? So what is the worst thing, Nancy Naigle, that you've ever done to your characters? And don't say give them unsweet tea.
That's true. Gosh, torturing my characters is the hardest part for me, because I really am kind of a glass half full kind of girl. And Kelsey will tell you, I would spend an hour tiptoeing through the tulips before I sent my girl up in a tree and shot at her. So, I'm not sure. I mean, I've had a lot of almost things. I had one of my books, I guess this scene would probably be the thing. I seem to remember
a character tied to a kitchen table as the house was caught on fire.
Yeah, that was bad. That was bad.
That was.
Yes, it was bad. That was my first book. Yeah. And I also had one where her dog got thrown in the hot tub, and of course he's rescued. Don't worry, because I love dogs. But that was the most horrifying thing I could think of. I was like, if anybody messed with my dog, that would be horrible. So
it's almost like messing with your children.
Tub. Yeah. And I'm definitely, I'm not going to say it's taboo, but for me, I'm the girl that, Kelsey talked about slamming the door when the hot and sexy stuff happens. Yeah, that's me. Y'all don't get to see any of that.
Which just breaks my heart.
I write it so bad, I tend to close the door just so I don't have to do it.
Oh God! You know what? Y'all just send those to me. I'll write you at least 3,000 to 6,000 words right on here with the door straight on open.
I might have to hide my eyes when I watch.
Oh, believe me, Nan does hide her eyes.
I do. Oh yeah. I blushed the whole time.
But Jenna, you're probably the sweetest one of us here today that hasn't said anything like this. But what is the worst thing you've ever done to one of your favorite?
Well, when I write mysteries, I do try to get them where they're about to be dead, so, and a couple of them I have, one of them's been shot, which I guess isn't very nice. But I do try to get them on they always figure out the bad guy right when the bad guy is there to take him out. Right. So it gets pretty precarious then. I'm a writer and
I got you.
We gotcha.
We got you. We're with you. We're with you.
As far as taboo, cheating or even the hint of cheating, that I can't do that.
I hear that from a lot of authors. Yeah.
I can't tolerate that. It's a thing now. I know people like that, but I can't. I mean, and I think that second chance of love, when we talked about before, I think I love it because in my mind, it's like this destined love, this one true love. And there wouldn't even be looking at another person in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I guess the taboo would be the cheating.
Okay. Caridad?
I think for me, I had an editor say this once, and it always stuck with me, even though I like to push it, is don't ever have one of your heroes do something that's irredeemable. That's just so awful that the reader would say, I don't care at all, what they do next. And I have to say this, I'm watching a new, they called it a mystery series, but it's a crime series. I won't say on what. And the hero just point blank shoots two of the people in the back dead. And to me, that was irredeemable.
Yeah.
So I found that from that point on to really engage with this guy as a hero, because as bad as those people were, it's wrong to shoot somebody in the back.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things that's always stuck with me, no matter what I was writing, especially with the romantic suspense and paranormals and everything, where you have a tendency to really push the edge of what those heroes are doing, is that it can't be anything that somebody would say, oh no, I can't root for this person anymore because that was just so awful. Whether it's cheating, as Jenna said, or whether it's hurting someone else or taking advantage of someone else, I can't really do that ends justify the means kind of thing in my stories.
Right.
So that's what it is for me.
Kelsey, you're up, baby.
Thank you. I think as far as the taboo part, I was trying to think about that. And Caridad, that makes a lot of sense to me, because as a reader, I would shut the book at that point because I wouldn't think he could come back from that, or any character. But it's interesting. And those are morality issues, right? That both you and Jenna were talking about. And for me, sometimes, yes, the morality issues would get in the way of that as a reader, but also things that disgust me on a personal level. So, and I not co-write, but collaborate on a romantic suspense series. And so we each have to write a little bit of each other's characters who are our heroes, but somebody else writes them as secondaries. And so one of my characters was written in another book by another author and here he was, he's in his 20s, late 20s. And he had clothes all over his room. He was living with his mom at the time, which sounds worse than what it really was, but that he had clothes everywhere and he waited for his mom. They stunk and he waited for his mom to come clean them up. And I was like, no, ma'am, we cannot do that because I cannot redeem somebody that disgusting. And I'm like, and if he's 20 something years old and his mama is still picking his clothes up,
he needs an attitude adjustment. Yeah.
No, I can't. Yeah, I can't really go there.
Yeah, I could see that.
But the worst thing I guess I've done is in one of my romantic suspenses is I have hurt a dog really, really so bad that I'm not going to tell you whether the dog survives or not.
Oh, poor puppy.
And that was hard. I know, no hurting the dogs, but let me just I know it's hard. You'd rather us kill people than kill the animals. I get it. But, when I thought about, because you're always wanting to hurt your hero and heroine. And in this particular book, the dog is my hero's service dog. And there is
Ah.
nothing that would have hurt him on a personal, even at that point, even killing that
Right.
heroine die would not have been as personal to him.
Right.
And so I think sometimes you have to think that way. What is most at jeopardy for that
Character.
character? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, since we're all talking about the different books that we've read, and or have written, what is your favorite series that you have done, or your favorite one book that you have written that you think really captures your soul? Jenna.
Oh God.
I'm sorry.
Oh, they're so different. I really like the series of the Sleuthing Couple, because I'm a diehard fan of Sleuthing Couple, Tommy and Tuppence from Agatha Christie, and
I'm a Nick and Nora girl myself.
Nick and
Go ahead,
Nora,
yeah.
exactly that type of thing. But I suppose I have just a straight romance, contemporary romance, and the second book in that is A Second Chance at Love. But it also does sort of pay homage to Jane Austen's Persuasion. And I sort of did that on purpose. It's the story isn't really the same, but there's just elements to it. And so that was sort of fun to, take this book that I love so much and try to find a way to same trope and kind of weave it in. And so I'll pick that one, I guess.
That sounds good. That sounds good, actually. Caridad, what is your favorite?
I've had a couple, but I think the one that really surprised me is my newest release, which is called The Family She Never Met. Number one, because I think it was the most challenging book I wrote, because it started off as a romance and it evolved into a lot more. There's a good powerful women's fiction element, because it's about three women who are separated by the hurts of the past and have to find a way to find a future. But why I think it's most important for me is that I included a lot of my family's and my real life stories about our escape from Cuba and what it was like when we came here to the United States. So a lot of that is interwoven into this fictional story of the three women, and a lot of what the grandmother does in the story is a lot of real stories about what my mother did to fight for freedom in Cuba and to get us here to the United States. So for me, it was a very emotional story on a variety of levels, but it was also a challenge because it was a much more serious book than any book I've ever written, but it still has, a really strong romance element that people are loving, and they are liking, and the interaction between the three women as they try to come together and find some way to get back in each other's lives after being separated for a very long time.
Yeah. Kelsey, how about you?
I'm sorry, I'm typing to someone. What's the question again, Nan?
I'm sorry, baby.
I'm like a goldfish.
Baby, I love you to death. It's okay. What is your favorite book that you've ever written?
Oh yes. See, sorry, I was already on to a different. Yeah, I was on a different topic already in my feeble little head. I probably have a couple. One is called Striking Edge, and it is a romantic suspense. And it's the one that I mentioned with the dog. And the reason that I love that book so much is because the hero is high on the autism spectrum, or what would have once been diagnosed as Asperger's syndrome. And he was such a delightful challenge to write. And I had several readers who have family members who are high on the autism spectrum read this before it was released, and literally brought tears to my eyes, because they said, thank you for giving a man who is like the men we love a happily ever after. And so that was really, really powerful. And then I have another one where my hero is a pretty tortured hero, and I don't tend to do those. And I just love it because half of his whole body is tattooed, and there's some thematic reasons for that. And he's just straight up hot.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Nancy, what about you? Your favorite book?
It's usually so hard because it's like picking your favorite children, which you're not supposed to do, but I'm sure everybody really does, because I'm pretty sure I was the favorite of my mom's. But I'm kidding. But my favorite, hands down, is The Shell Collector. Yeah, it came out last May. And like you, Caridad, thank you. I think because it's got so much personal stuff in it too, and I think because it's a story around grief, and as most people that know me know that I lost my husband in 2014, and so out of coming out of that grief of my own journey, I had also heard a story in our family about a woman who had found a shell on the beach in North Carolina that had scripture in it, and a year later she found another one that had a positive message in it. And I kept thinking, we all need a bucket of shells like that when we're going through it. And lucky for me, I had girlfriends that pretty much did something like that. I have a whole treasure chest of these scrolled, promising, uplifting notes from people, and Kelsey was a part of that put those together, each one tied with a little ribbon, that helped me get through it. So that book is so important to me, and it sounds like a bummer, and it's not. There is so much up stuff in the story. It's set on the beach, and there's an elderly woman that walks the beach every day and collects shells and sea glass, and it's a wonderful, beautiful friendship between this young widow and her two children and this older woman who's seeing her final days. And I just loved writing it. I've loved reading the reviews and talking to the people that it's touched along the way. It's a really touching story, and my hope is that when ultimately we all go through that, that something positive from that story is going to tickle a memory and help you kind of lift up out of that grief and journey forward. So that is my most special book.
And I will say, for those of you that have not seen the Kelsey interview of Miss Nancy, and that's on the website, please watch it, because there's some interesting information about the shell collectors that you might want to find out. I mean, I was so excited. I had to jump up and down when I heard it.
Breaking news. First hear it. Suffolk Mystery Authors Festival.
There you go. There you go. I know that we are getting close to our time. And I want to say, first of all, thank you all for coming, and thank you all for putting up with the little glitch that we had to get on. I am amazed by all of you. I still consider myself a novice writer. So I am learning as I go on and learning from you and all the things that you do. You guys are absolutely fantastic.
Hey, Nan,
do you
I'm
find
sorry
that
to
writing
interrupt.
becomes a passion?
Nan, can I interrupt for just a second?
Yes, baby.
There are two questions in the Q&A, and it's just making me twitchy because I want to make sure that they get answered. Sorry.
Read them. No, go read them.
So from Cynthia DeWitt, I'm so afraid somebody's going to go away unhappy and not answered. So to Nan, Nancy Naigle, I know Hallmark has bought some of your books to TV, has brought some of your books to TV. How much, if any, input do you get to have in the production? Overall, are you usually happy with how they are presented?
You get zero input. They do not even want the screenwriters to chat with you for opinions or input. Zero. Yeah. And I have some funny stories about things that conflict with the book and the movie that are hysterical, but we'll tell that another time. But I am always happy with them. I will say Sand Dollar Cove was the one book that was totally different. The movie is totally different from the book. Totally. The roles of the hero and heroine are flip-flopped. It was set up in the Northeast instead of in the South. I mean, just the only thing they kept were the names of the characters and the name of the town, Sand Dollar Cove. Everything else is different, but both are purely delightful stories. So I am perfectly happy with it. And I don't know anybody that's had their book made into a movie that has been horrified by anything. But even when the stories are different, the readers are usually pretty upset. So I think the readers are more upset than we are.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I reached out to Nancy when they made my one of my releases, South Beach Love, came out as a movie in October, and I reached out to Nancy and I said, Nancy, they changed so much. Oh my God. And I only really got to talk to the director. Was nice enough to call me literally the day before they started filming to say, can we talk about like what's important to you in this story and everything. So he was really sweet, and we talked for a good hour on the phone about what was important and everything. But they did manage to change a lot, but still, it was still a delightful movie.
It's a beautiful
story.
Out,
so,
but we did. We laughed. Caridad and I were tossing notes back and forth, and we were laughing. And she's like, "It's kind of like a Cuban secret ingredient."
Yeah, it really was. I mean, it was so funny. The only thing that I did have to seriously object to in the movie, you do not put mint in ropa vieja ever. Don't listen to what they told you in the movie about that. It's disgusting. I hate mints, so don't do it. That was it. That's all.
It should come with a disclaimer.
It should. Don't use mint.
Well, I know we're coming close to our time, and I just want to say thank you all for being here. Thank you to the Suffolk Mystery Authors Festival for letting us sit on the front porch here and chat. Anybody have a release coming up real quick that you can give just a quick shout out for?
I've got May 3rd, What Remains True. We're going back to Antler Creek, which was where Christmas Angels was set.
Okay. Anybody else?
I've got May, Dead But Not Forgotten, which would be the 7th book in the Valentine mysteries.
Right.
Oh, okay. Okay. Caridad.
As I mentioned, The Family She Never Met just came out on February 8th, I think. And also I have a free read starting on March 19th on harlequin.com called Deadly Chase, because we have a new Canine Patrol series. That's, for me, the first book in the series releases on March 29th, and it's called Decoy Training. So lots of stuff happening.
Good, good. Kelsey.
I don't right now. We're in the middle of a state to state move. So as you can tell from the, me saying, what's the question? I'm lucky to be able to write on a Post-it note right now. So
we're glad we can't see what's behind the curtain there.
Yeah, that's why I got the background, y'all. So.
There's men moving couches.
You should have put your hunky tattooed guy behind you.
I know.
That would have been better.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we're going to close this out now. And I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for letting me participate with you guys. And I cannot wait to get a hold of some of these books and read them and just enjoy your characters. Thank you.
Thank you,
Nan.
Thank you, everybody who came to visit.
Joining in. My pleasure.